Imagine a billionaire, an absolute titan of industry, waking up one day and deciding to just give away his entire company. And not just to anyone, but to save the planet. Sounds like a modern-day fairy tale, right? When Patagonia's founder, Yvon Chouinard, announced he was doing exactly that, the headlines literally exploded with praise. People were saying, finally, a corporate leader putting the earth before profits. But is that really the whole story? $3 billion. That is the massive valuation of the donated company. But according to the fascinating source analysis we're diving into today, this seemingly selfless act might actually be a masterclass in tax avoidance and wealth preservation. Which brings us to the ultimate question explored by our source material. Are these grand, sweeping gestures genuine philanthropy? Or are they actually a systemic financial maneuver designed to basically hoard influence? Well, here's why some critics argue there's a much darker reality hiding behind all those feel-good headlines. In this explainer, we're unpacking the billionaire playbook: systemic control, tax avoidance, political influence, and historical precedents. Section 1, the Patagonia Paradox, unpacking the maneuver. Our source material points out a really stark distinction between public perception and financial reality here. I mean, think about it. If you just wanted to keep your company's values intact, you could simply hand the shares over to your kids, right? Well, there's a very specific reason he didn't do that. You see, when you or I think of a charity, we usually picture a 501c3, like the one on the left. Those organizations are strictly barred from making political contributions. But here is the kicker. 98% of Patagonia's shares didn't go to a regular charity. They went to a brand new organization called the Holdfast Collective, which is a 501c4. And that distinction is absolutely crucial, because it means it is entirely legal for them to use those funds to donate to politicians, bankroll super PACs, and run direct political campaigns. And according to the source, this specific organization is set to receive roughly $100 million a year in profit to do exactly that. So the really crucial point to understand is the sheer financial windfall of this specific setup. The source claims that by routing 98% of the company this way, the Chouinard family managed to avoid roughly $1.2 billion in gift taxes. Yeah, billion with a B. Meanwhile, what happened to the remaining 2% of the shares? Well, those are the all-important voting shares that actually control the company, and they were given to a trust completely controlled by the family. So to put that into perspective, they avoided a massive tax bill while retaining absolute control over the company forever. Moving into Section 2, the precedent, a bipartisan mechanism. This perfectly illustrates that we aren't just looking at some isolated loophole for one eco-friendly company. Our source argues that the exact same tax-free influence machine is being utilized across the entire political spectrum. Let's look at the breakdown. On one side, you have Yvon Chouinard leveraging this exact structure to fund environmental action. But on the other side, conservative billionaire Barry Side used the very same maneuver to donate his entire fortune to an organization run by Leonard Leo, which is aimed at conservative Supreme Court activism. The source points out that regardless of whether you align with the left or the right, the underlying financial mechanism they are using is identical. The main critique presented by our source here is that this mechanism effectively bypasses democracy altogether. The whole idea of a democratic system is spreading power widely, right? But this legal loophole allows a few incredibly wealthy individuals to amass fortunes, dodge taxes, and then convert that wealth into permanent, privately controlled political power. Essentially, they get to decide the country's direction without a single vote ever being cast. Section 3, the humble billionaire myth. Marketing the reluctant tycoon. Now, you might be wondering, if this is really all about hoarding power, why do we constantly cheer for these guys? Well, according to the analysis, there is a very deliberate PR playbook at work here. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how often articles mention a billionaire driving some beat-up old truck or a rusty Subaru, or how Warren Buffett supposedly clips coupons, or those crazy stories of Chouinard literally eating cat food to save a buck? The source argues this is highly calculated marketing. By cultivating this folksy, relatable, and reluctant image, billionaires successfully distract the public from the sheer, mind-boggling scale of their wealth and the aggressive business practices it actually took to get there. And the source juxtaposes this PR image perfectly with the reality of someone like Sam Walton's legacy. Take a look at the left side here. You see the pristine, heavily funded hometown of Bentonville, Arkansas, complete with a $200 million art museum funded by the Walton family. It looks incredibly generous, no doubt about it. But then on the right, the source cites a 2008 MIT study revealing that Walmart's expansion was actually responsible for a 40 to 50% decline in small discount stores across the country, which correlated with negative economic and social impacts in those displaced towns. It's like the philanthropy in one town masks the systemic extraction of wealth from countless others. Which leads us to Section 4, the blueprint, 19th century origins. Okay, so here is the big reveal, the part of the analysis that I found truly mind-blowing. This entire PR strategy, it isn't some modern invention cooked up by a Silicon Valley PR firm. Not at all. Listen to this quote from Andrew Carnegie's famous essay, The Gospel of Wealth, written way back in the late 19th century. It is the duty of a rich man to set an example of modest, unostentatious living, shunning display or extravagance. The source points out that modern billionaires aren't being these radical free thinkers when they drive old cars. They are quite literally following a script left for them by the original tycoons of the Gilded Age. But as the source strictly reminds us, Carnegie's philanthropy disguised a completely broken system. The reality of the Gilded Age featured rampant monopolies, massive price gouging, and exploited workers who had absolutely no right to organize and certainly no minimum wage guarantees. So that grand charity of the era, it was built entirely on the backs of a plutocratic system that actively crushed labor movements and dominated the political landscape. Section 5, the historical wealth cycle, boom, bust, and regulation. To really grasp how all of this impacts us today, the source traces the macroeconomic cycle over the last century. It's a fascinating timeline. The extreme wealth hoarding of the late 1800s Gilded Age ultimately crashed headfirst into the Great Depression of the 1930s. In response to that crisis, FDR's New Deal introduced strong labor protections, antitrust laws, and very high taxation on the wealthy. And this directly led to the massive middle-class expansion of the 1950s, an era where wealth was spread out much, much more evenly. But then, as you'll see, the pendulum swung back. Beginning in the 70s and 80s, we entered a brand new era of deregulation. The source identifies 4 specific steps that dismantled that mid-century prosperity. Step 1, deregulating the financial industry and significantly weakening antitrust laws. Step 2, cutting taxes for the wealthy. Step 3, gutting the labor movement and welfare protections. And the mathematical result of these policy shifts over the last 40 years? That brings us to step 4, skyrocketing wealth inequality and utterly stagnant wages for your average worker. Section 6, a new Gilded Age, modern wealth concentration. Which brings our source's narrative right back to the present day. Check out this chart. Today, the top 0.1% own nearly as much wealth as the bottom 90% combined. The pie has been sliced so incredibly unevenly that the middle class is essentially being completely squeezed out. We are returning to a wealth distribution that looks dangerously similar to the era of Andrew Carnegie. Ultimately, the source leaves us with this stark conclusion: there are no accidental billionaires. The analysis argues that it is a complete myth to believe in a good billionaire who just accidentally stumbled into immense wealth and wants nothing more than to give it all away. Instead, the system itself functions by allowing untaxed wealth to convert into permanent, unaccountable political power, all of which is heavily masked by brilliant public relations. Which leaves us staring at a deeply provocative question. Who holds the true power to enact change in a democracy? Is it us, the voters, or is it the architects of these billion-dollar trusts? Understanding these tax structures is really the first step in seeing how modern power actually operates. But believe it or not, political philanthropy is just one way immense wealth shapes our world out of plain sight. There's a whole other side of hidden markets that most everyday buyers never even see, and we are going to expose exactly how those function in our next explainer.